In this video, we're going to go over the data types available in the line item quoting database system. So this is going to be something you're going to set up when you are customizing or creating your own custom databases. The data types will already be preset in all the pre-made databases. So we'll just go into the data and display, line item quote database, and we'll just open one of our pre-made databases. Go to edit definition, and the data types are the same with one exception between global fields and line item fields. In line item fields, we have one extra data type, which is called the line data type. And there's one difference between how one data type works between globals and line items, which is the increment data type. And we'll get into that when we get to the explanations of all of them. So I'll just go into the line item fields. We'll just go through and we can see in this database we already have a string, a currency, a numeric, a Boolean data types set up in these fields. And we'll just add a new field just to go over all the available data types and some of the caveats with them. So when you create or edit a global or line item field, you've got the data type. And you'll see all the different data types you can assign. So string, that's fairly simple. It's just your straight up numbers, symbols, letters, just a string. There is one limit here where your string size can only be 255 characters long. For an integer data type, this is just whole numbers. So a -10, 0, 5, just whole numbers with no decimals. A numeric data type, that is a number with 0 or more decimal points. A currency data type, now this is actually stored as a numeric, and it's just for dollar amounts. And it's stored internally as just a straight up numeric, a positive, negative number, a 0 with 1 or 2 decimal places. It's the formatting, like if we select currency, the formatting of how it looks in the database is going to be defined by the data type. So a currency data type will always by default display with the formatting of your default currency type that you have selected for your project. So that's going to default to US dollar. So it'll be a $, your amount, a period, and 2 decimal points. You can alter that with the formatting. So say if you want your currency to have parentheses around it for a negative number, you would use a formatting string like these. Say if we wanted the word 0 output into the tables when you have a 0 amount, you can specify that here. So you can have a slightly different formatting for positive, negative, and 0 amounts. And this is also how you set up foreign currency codes. And there'll be other videos that get into formatting. So formatting is kind of a separate thing than the data type. However, the data type will have a default formatting, which is your system currency. Now for a percentage, this is stored as a numeric, a positive, negative number, 0 with 0 or more decimal points. The display is going to usually default to a couple decimal points followed by a parenthesis symbol. So this is stored internally in the database as say if we're going to have a 6.5% tax rate, we're going to store it internally as 0.065, but it will be displayed based on the default formatting as say 6.5% sign. And you, again, like currency, we use formatting strings to alter the display of the data type. Now, an alphanumeric, that's just numbers, letters, spaces. That's good for, say, product codes. It just limits you to not using symbols. Now, the Boolean data type, that's stored as either a 0 or a 1. You can use it in calculations. So, for example, using a Boolean data type is one way to set up line item taxes. So we would add a field to our category called is it taxable and set the data type to Boolean. Now we can use the display. So instead of always being 0 or 1, we can use the display formatting to show us options for true, false, yes, no, on, off, or 0, 1. And then in this case, if we were going to use a Boolean as a calculation for is it taxable, we would just create a calculation, multiply the is taxable field, which is 0 or 1, times the tax rate and the quantity and the amount, and get our line item level taxes. Now the increment data type, this is probably the most complicated data type, and it's slightly different depending on whether you use the increment on a global field or a line item field. Now, if you set an increment data type on a global field, it will increment across each project. So say if we created 5 different proposals, you're going to increment that field automatically for every new project. So this might be a good way to, say, create a invoice number or a work order number where you want it to auto increment for every project. Now, when you use an increment on a line item field, you will have a starting value, and that starting value can be a number, it can be a field, it could be the current date, could just be the number 0, and that will be set to the first line item you create. And then you'll have an increment value. Now that increment value could be a number or it could be another field. So this is how we create, say, running subtotals, project schedules, where we increment the next date of a task based on the previous row's date and increment by the days till the next task. And since the increment data type's fairly complicated, there will be some example databases already set up where you can see how to do, say, a decrementing field for a balance sheet, an incrementing running subtotal for an amount, and an incrementing start date for projects. And I'll show that real quick when we're done going through the list. Now, you have a date time data type. And again, the formatting of whether you're going to display it as year, month, date, as numbers, or spelled out as month, day, year, or just the day and month, that is the formatting that you apply. So you have lots of different options. These are just some default ones. And you just apply the formatting to the date time, and that's how it will actually be output into the documents. Now you can do some calculations on date times as well, and I'll get into showing you some of the examples where you can increment a date time by seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, quarters, or years. And that's done by creating a second field, which would be a numeric field that's set to the increment type, which would be seconds, months, days, years, so on. And I'll show you an example of that later. And you can also do some other calculations on dates, and you can do some other basic date calculations. Basically to subtract a date from another to get the difference. Now your drop-down list data type, this allows you to create a drop-down list of items with display values that'll be on a drop-down list, and the underlying data that is operated on will be numeric. So this is how you can create a list of, say, salespeople. You can create lists of product codes, whatever you need. And to use drop-down lists, you'll have to go out and actually create the drop-down list first. And how you do that is you would go out to the Lists tab, and there'll be another video on how to manage lists. But we would basically go into this, we would add a list, we would set up our list of display values and underlying data values, and then when we select our drop-down list, we would have another drop-down over here which would let us set up that list. Then when you're creating your projects, instead of a free-form text field to enter your data into, you just have a drop-down menu of those items. Now, because a drop-down list, the internal data is stored as numerics, you can use it as a calculation. So your user can select a text value from a drop-down list, and then you could use it in a calculation, since each item in the drop-down list will have a different number. Now, your URL data type, URLs have two parts. You have a display value and the underlying data value. So for example, we could say something like this, where when this information is output to the documents, you will see the display value with a hyperlink, and then if you click the hyperlink, it's going to go out to the underlying data value. And your values, these can be valid URLs or mail to addresses. Now for image data types, again, images, kind of like drop-down lists, have to be set up externally first. So we would go out and set up the image database. I'll show you that in a second after this last data type. So the line number is only used in the field level, and that's just a simple incremental number from 1 to X, which is the line number of the line item. So if you have 5 line items, they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this data type is something you might use if you want in your output to have like the number 1 through X as your first column, just for display purposes. Okay, now for the image database, if you're going to use the image data type, you have to set up an image database. So you would go back out to the main list of tabs, go into the images, and you would set up your image database. And an image is going to have the underlying file out on your hard drive and a display name, because you're going to be selecting your images from a list, and so you can have a nice visual display of the names of your files to pick from. And then when that documents get created, the actual picture will get pulled in from the file and get inserted into the document. And you can set up your image database to be global across your entire database, or you can have images specific to each category. So you could have a list of product images, you could have a list of employee images for resume pages, and so on. So that is an overall description of all of the data types, and you can see examples up here. Go to the main screen for the line item database, click the pre-made databases tab, go into the example DBs, and you can see lots of examples of using these various data types. So here's an image and a URL example, and you can just look at results. So these are just some examples of how Images would get inserted into a table. An example of the increment data type, where we're doing a running subtotal. You see the value 10, and then the next one's added to it, the next one's added to it, and so on. You can see examples of how to concatenate strings. Here's a URL example where we can have the display type, and then you see the underlying URL that's clickable. So that's pretty much all you need to know about the data types. So the data type will define how it's stored internally, a couple of the caveats of how it's used, and then how it's displayed by default, and then you'll use formatting strings to customize the formatting. So make sure to watch that video on formatting options for the various data types. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and click subscribe to keep up on the latest proposal writing tips with Proposal Kit.